The boy had everything, yet he felt nothing. He was born in the shadow of wealth in the towering glass walls of a mansion where chandeliers sparkled even at noon and where his footsteps echoed against marble floors polished so often they reflected back a hollow image of his own face. He was the son of a billionaire adored by strangers, envied by peers, surrounded by every object that money could buy. Yet within him lived a gnawing emptiness that no luxury could quiet. Every morning he woke, with a weight that no gold chain, no luxury car, no sprawling estate could remove. His name was Daniel, a name whispered in society circles, a name written in the ink of privilege. But for him, it felt like a cage built of expectations, a cage built of comparisons, a cage built of a father whose voice thundered not with love, but with command. Daniel had tried. He had tried to live up to the vision of success that had been carved for him like a statue meant to gleam in the family's empire. He attended the finest schools, surrounded by sons and daughters of magnates who spoke of stocks before they spoke of dreams. He drove sports cars to college, yet left each lecture hall with a notebook as empty as his heart. His grades fell his focus, shattered his sense of self, shrank. He was called privileged, yet felt powerless. Called rich, yet felt bankrupt in wisdom. It was in the silence of a vast library at his elite academy that Daniel's story began to bend toward truth. On that day, he had failed another exam, his professor's red ink bleeding across the page like wounds he could not hide. His friends laughed in the hall, their voices carrying a cruel rhythm, reminding him that wealth could not buy brilliance. He sat with his head buried in his arms, shoulders, heavy eyes wet, yet unseen, for he had mastered the art of crying without sound. He wanted to disappear, vanish beneath the mountain of expectations. Yet fate placed someone in that moment, a figure unnoticed by the world, yet destined to shape his destiny. The janitor walked quietly, his broom swaying across the marble floor, a man bent with years yet upright in spirit. His name was Samuel. His uniform was faded, his shoes worn, but his eyes were steady and alive eyes that had seen struggles wealth could never fathom, eyes that carried the calm of wisdom built not in books, but in battles with life itself. Samuel moved with no rush, his presence blending into the background like the hum of air. Yet on this day, something made him pause. He saw the boy, the billionaire's son, slumped in despair, tears hidden behind pride, and he chose not to look away. For Samuel knew the weight of silence, and he knew when silence needed to be broken. He set the broom aside. Gently, as though setting down years of burden, he walked closer, and in a voice neither loud nor soft, but certain, he spoke a sentence that would split Daniel's life into before and after. Samuel looked at Daniel and said quietly yet firmly, "Young man, you are drowning in an ocean of wealth but starving for a drop of wisdom." His words cut through the silence like a blade, clean, sharp, and undeniable. Daniel lifted his head, startled, had heard countless voices before, tutors, coaches, advisors, professors, all telling him how to succeed, all telling him what he lacked, but never before had he heard such raw truth from a man whose hands bore calluses and whose uniform carried stains of labor. His heart stilled, his pride wavered, his soul leaned toward the voice as if it had been waiting for this exact sentence his entire life. Daniel wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting the janitor to see his weakness, but Samuel did not flinch, nor pretend to ignore it. He leaned on his broom like a staff and said, "Do you know why your father's money cannot save you? Because money cannot teach you how to see. Money cannot show you who you are. It can only buy mirrors, and mirrors only reflect, not reveal." Daniel blinked, stunned. His throat tightened. His mind scrambled to form a response, but words stumbled like broken glass. He had grown up in a world where people bowed to his last name, where every sentence toward him was coated with flattery or fear. Yet this man, this janitor, dared to strip away the armor and touch the wound beneath. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel finally asked, voice low, more defensive than curious. Samuel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Because truth is like a seed," he said. "It must be planted in soil that has cracked open. You, my boy, are cracked open right now. The pain you feel is not your enemy. It is the soil ready for truth to grow." Daniel fell silent. His fists clenched, then loosened. His chest rose and fell as if battling two storms inside him. One storm of anger, pride, and defense. Another storm of hunger, longing, and surrender. Over the next days, something strange began. Daniel found himself searching for the janitor, not consciously, but in the quiet corners of his heart. Every time he saw Samuel sweeping or mopping or moving silently through the halls, he felt a pull, an invisible tether drawing him near. At first he resisted. The world would mock him for even speaking to a janitor. His father would rage. His peers would sneer, yet curiosity gnawed away at resistance. One afternoon, after failing yet another class discussion, he found Samuel sitting alone during his break eating a simple meal of bread and soup. Daniel hesitated, then sat across from him. No one had ever seen him choose such company, but at that moment Daniel did not care. "You said something last time?" Daniel began carefully, as though testing the air. "That money cannot teach me how to see." "What did you mean?" Samuel chewed, slowly, swallowed, then placed his spoon down. He looked at Daniel, not at the wealth surrounding him, not at the label on his clothes, but at his eyes. "I mean this," he said. "You see numbers on a paper and think that is success. You see cars and think that is freedom. You see applause and think that is love. But real seeing is knowing who you are without all those things. Tell me, young man, without your father's name, without his money, without his power, who are you?" The question struck Daniel like lightning. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands trembled slightly. He had no answer. He had been so busy being his father's son, so busy living under the shadow of an empire, that he had never once asked himself that question. His silence was the answer, and Samuel knew it. He leaned back and said, "That is why you are lost. Money has given you everything, but stolen your chance to find yourself." That night Daniel could not sleep. The janitor's question echoed in his skull again and again. "Who are you without money, without power, without a name?" He stared at the ceiling of his massive room, chandeliers glimmering above yet feeling like prison bars. His friends chased pleasure. His father chased legacy, but he felt none of it belonged. To him, he realized he had never chosen. He had been chosen for he was drifting in the current of wealth without direction, without anchor. The following week, Daniel returned to Samuel again. This time not by accident, but by decision. He found him scrubbing. The floor, his back bent, yet his presence unwavering. Daniel crouched beside him and whispered, "Teach me." Samuel looked at him with calm eyes. "Teach you what?" "Teach me how to see." Daniel said, and so began a journey that no textbook had written and no classroom had prepared a billionaire's son sitting at the feet of a janitor. Not for pity, not for performance, but for truth. Samuel did not lecture. He told stories, stories of his childhood in poverty, stories of mistakes he had made of nights, when hunger clawed at his stomach, stories of how he once chased quick money and lost everything, stories of how he rebuilt piece by piece, not with wealth, but with wisdom. Each story landed in Daniel's heart like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of thought deeper than anything his professors had spoken. One evening, Samuel said something that sealed Daniel's transformation. "You think failure is your enemy, boy, but failure is the teacher that wealth tried to steal from you. Every red mark on your paper is a lesson. Every stumble is a guide. If you hide from failure, you hide from yourself. Daniel listened, eyes burning with tears, not of despair, but of recognition. For the first time, he saw his failures not as proof of weakness, but as signs of growth waiting to happen. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel found himself drawn again and again to the quiet strength of Samuel. The janitor never sought attention, never raised his voice, yet every word he spoke carried a weight Daniel could not ignore. It was as though Samuel had discovered truths about life that no wealth or education could purchase. One afternoon, Daniel sat with Samuel near the back entrance of the school, where few ever wandered. The air smelled of rain, and the sound of dripping water echoed off the walls. Samuel leaned against the wall broom resting nearby, and Daniel sat cross-legged on the concrete like a child, waiting for his elder. Samuel began without prompt. "Do you know why people fear silence?" Daniel frowned. "No, why?" Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because silence tells the truth. Noise can hide pain with laughter, with applause, with music, with money. But when the world goes quiet, your heart speaks, and many men are too afraid to hear it." Daniel lowered his head. The words pierced him. He realized how often he drowned himself in distractions, expensive parties, loud cars, constant screens, yet none of it silenced the ache inside. Over the next lessons, Samuel gave him tasks, not lectures. He told Daniel to spend one evening without touching his phone, computer, or television. Just sit with his thoughts. For Daniel, it was torture. At first, he paced through his mansion, restless, itching for noise. He almost gave up, but Samuel's voice echoed in his memory. Silence tells the truth. Eventually, Daniel sat by the window staring at the night sky. For the first time in years, he listened. To his fear, to his loneliness, to the echo of his mother's voice before she passed away, to the emptiness behind his father's stern commands. He cried that night, silent tears sliding down his face. But in that silence, he also felt something new. He felt real. The next day, when Samuel saw him, he nodded knowingly. "You listened, didn't you?" Daniel nodded quietly, unable to speak. Samuel smiled, then said, "Good truth has begun its work." Another time, Samuel brought Daniel to the school's old boiler room, a place most students had never entered. The air was hot, the walls rough. Samuel pointed at the massive machinery and said, "Do you know why? This place matters." Daniel shook his head. Samuel continued, "Because everything above us, every light, every class, every voice depends on the labor here down below. Without this, no luxury exists. Wealth is built on unseen labor, boy. Never forget that." Daniel looked around at the rusty pipes, the hissing valves, and suddenly he felt shame. He had lived his life enjoying what others built without even noticing them. That night when he sat at his father's dinner table staring at silver dishes, remembered Samuel's words and the faces of the workers who made such luxury possible one evening. Daniel asked Samuel, "How do I change? How do I stop being lost?" Samuel answered with calm certainty, "By serving." Daniel blinked confused. Serving. Who? Anyone. Samuel said, "Start small. Serve your classmates. Serve the workers here. Serve even those who cannot repay you. The path to finding yourself is not in taking, but in giving at first." Daniel resisted. His pride flared up again. A billionaire's son serving others. It sounded absurd, yet something in Samuel's tone disarmed him. It was not a command, but a truth. So Daniel tried. The next day, when a fellow student dropped his books, Daniel bent down and helped him pick them up. The student stared at him in shock, unused to kindness from someone like Daniel. Later, he secretly paid for another student's lunch when he noticed the boy had none. The small acts burned his pride, but slowly they also softened his heart. Samuel noticed the shift, he said. You see, boy, giving does not make you less, it makes you more money. Tried to trick you into thinking power comes from taking, but real power comes from what you give freely. Daniel nodded, his eyes clear for the first time in years. Transformation is never smooth. The world began to notice his change and mocked him. His wealthy friends sneered. Why waste your time with janitors and losers? His father raged, telling him to stop embarrassing the family. Daniel stood torn between two worlds. One world of power, wealth and pride, the other of truth, service and wisdom. His nights grew restless, his days heavy. Yet each time he wanted to give up, Samuel reminded him of the seed inside. A seed takes time to grow, boy, he would say. The soil must stay open or the seed dies. Daniel held on to those words even as storms raged around him. The breaking point came when Daniel failed yet another exam. His father humiliated him in front of teachers and peers, declaring him useless. Shame to the family. Daniel fled the scene, his heart collapsing in on itself. He ran to the back halls where he knew Samuel would be, and there he found him quietly mopping the floor. Daniel collapsed at his feet, tears pouring. Samuel placed the mop aside and lifted him gently, saying, "Let the world call you what it will. It does not define you, your truth does." Daniel sobbed until his chest ached, but in those arms, those words, he felt something he had never felt before. Freedom. From then on, Daniel, committed. Fully, Samuel became not just his mentor, but his compass. His classes still challenged him, but he no longer feared failure. He studied with sincerity. He served others with humility. He listened with silence. He was no longer chasing approval. He was chasing truth. Slowly, his grades improved. Slowly, his classmates respected him, not for his money, but for his presence. Slowly, he began to discover an identity that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with wisdom. And the greatest shift came the day he stood before his father. Boldly, he said, "Father, I am not your shadow. I am my own man. Wealth will not define me. Service will. Wealth will not guide me. Truth will." His father raged, but Daniel did not flinch. For the first time, he saw the billionaire not as a god, but as a man bound by fear of losing power, and Daniel realized he was freer than his father had ever been. Weeks turned into months, and the change in Daniel could no longer be hidden. At first, it was subtle, a softer tone in his voice, a willingness to listen, a kindness that slipped through his actions. But soon it became impossible to ignore. He was no longer the arrogant son of a billionaire strutting through the hallways with pride. He walked with a calm humility that confused and intrigued his classmates. One morning, when a younger student was being bullied, Daniel stepped forward. He remembered Samuel's words about service, about courage. Without hesitation, he placed himself between the boy and the bullies, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "Enough," he said. His tone carried no arrogance, no threat, just certainty. And somehow that certainty broke through. The bullies backed down, mumbling excuses. Daniel guided the younger boy away. His classmates, who had once laughed at him, now whispered in awe, not because of his money, not because of his last name, but because of the strength he carried inside. Later, Samuel found him sitting outside under the shade of the great oak tree. Samuel's smile was faint but proud. "So you found your strength, boy?" he said. Daniel looked down, embarrassed. "I only did what you told me." Samuel shook his head firmly. "No, you did what was in you. All I did was point you to it." That moment sealed a truth for Daniel. He realized Samuel was not creating something new in him. He was uncovering what had always been buried under wealth, under fear, under pride. And that realization gave Daniel a new hunger. He wanted to live by this truth, not just survive it. he began to notice things he had never seen before. The janitors working silently each morning to keep the school alive. The cafeteria staff serving meals with tired smiles. The security guards standing for hours at the gate. He started greeting them with respect, calling them by name, offering small acts of gratitude. The first time he carried trays back to the kitchen, his classmates gaped in disbelief. But Daniel no longer cared about their opinions. Something inside him had shifted permanently. News of his transformation spread quickly. At home, his father was furious. "What nonsense has gotten into you?" he demanded. "You are not one of them. You are above them." But Daniel stood firm. For once, he was not afraid. "Father," he replied quietly, "you are wrong. I am not above them. I am them. We are all the same." His father's face turned crimson with rage, but Daniel no longer trembled. One evening, Samuel gave him another challenge. "Meet me at dawn tomorrow." Daniel arrived at the schoolyard while the world was still dark. The air was cool, heavy with dew. Samuel handed him a broom. "Sweep." Samuel ordered. Daniel blinked but said nothing. He swept the empty courtyard, his hands blistering, unused to such labor. By sunrise, his back ached, sweat dripping down his forehead. Samuel finally said, "Do you understand now?" Daniel panted, leaning on the broom. Understand what? Samuel's eyes softened. That no work is beneath you, boy. That dignity comes not from what you avoid, but from what you embrace. Wealth tried to teach you that labor is shameful. Truth shows you it is sacred. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized he had looked down on workers all his life, blind to their strength and worth. Now sweeping floors at dawn felt like the most honorable act he had ever done. Over time, Daniel began teaching others what Samuel had given him, not through speeches, but through actions. When a group project was assigned, he carried his share. When classmates struggled, he stayed late to help. When tensions rose, he offered calm words. He was not perfect. He stumbled. He fell back into pride at times, but each mistake brought him back to Samuel's lessons. He was changing, not into someone new, but into someone true. The world, however, does not forgive change easily. His wealthy friends turned against him, whispering that he was weak, a traitor to his class. Teachers doubted his sincerity, assuming he was playing some game. His father grew harsher each day, demanding he return to the cold, proud image of the family name. But Daniel clung to Samuel's words like a lifeline. A seed takes time. Boy, a seed takes storms. He let the storms come and endured them. One afternoon, an opportunity arose that would test everything he had learned. The school held a debate contest, and Daniel was expected to participate. In the past, he would have relied on arrogance, throwing his father's name around to gain respect. But this time he chose differently. He spent nights preparing Samuel, guiding him through the process, not teaching him the arguments, but reminding him to speak from truth. The night of the contest, the auditorium buzzed with noise. Students and parents filled. The seats billionaires sat in the front row, proud of their heirs. Daniel's father among them, eyes sharp and expectant. When it was Daniel's turn, he walked to the stage, his heart pounding. His father's gaze was heavy, but Samuel's steady nod from the corner gave him courage. He began softly. "My name is Daniel, and I have failed more times than I can count." A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. He continued, "For years, I thought money could hide my failures, that wealth could buy me identity. But money cannot buy truth, and the truth is I was lost." His voice grew stronger, lost until someone I once overlooked showed me what it means to live. He glanced at Samuel in the back, a man with no riches, no fame, yet more wisdom than anyone I have ever met. The room fell silent. Daniel's words carried like fire. Not polished, not perfect, but real. He spoke of silence, of service, of dignity, of truth. Every lesson Samuel had taught him flowed from his heart. He did not try to win. He tried to share. And when he finished, the silence lingered before erupting into applause. His father sat stiff, his face unreadable, but others looked at Daniel with new eyes, not as the billionaire's son, not as the failure, but as a young man who had discovered a strength deeper than wealth. That night, Samuel placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You spoke your truth, boy, and once truth is spoken, it cannot be silenced." Daniel felt a weight lift from him. A door had opened, not just for himself, but for everyone who had listened. The applause from the debate still echoed in Daniel's mind long after the auditorium had emptied. But the moment that mattered most was not the applause. It was the silence afterward, when he locked eyes with his father across the room. His father's face was stone, his gaze cold as steel. That silence carried more weight than the cheers of 1,000 voices. At home, the storm broke. His father's voice thundered through the mansion walls. "You humiliated me. You humiliated this family." Daniel stood. In the center of the room, his fists clenched but his heart steady. "Father," he said, "I spoke the truth. Wealth is not power, if it blinds you to humanity." His father slammed his fist on the polished oak desk. "You think you are wiser than me, boy? Everything you are comes from me. Without me, you are nothing." Daniel's chest tightened, but he remembered Samuel's words. "Speak from truth, not from fear." He raised his head. "No, father. Without truth, I am nothing. With truth, I can be anything." That night, Daniel was thrown out of his father's office. His future in the family line was uncertain. His father warned him that he would cut him off, strip him of privilege. Daniel returned to his room, shaken yet strangely free. For the first time, he realized that losing wealth did not terrify him as it once did. He had found something greater. The next morning, Daniel found Samuel waiting for him near the courtyard. The old janitor could see the storm in his eyes. He asked quietly, "What did you lose?" Daniel swallowed. "Hard everything." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then you are ready to gain?" Samuel's words struck deep. Daniel did not fully understand, but he trusted them. Days passed, and the conflict between Daniel and his father only grew sharper. Rumors spread among the students. Some mocked him, calling him the fallen prince. Others admired him, whispering that he was finally real. The teachers began noticing his effort, his sincerity. He was no longer the spoiled heir who failed every test. He was the student who worked harder than anyone, even harder than those who had started far ahead, but his father was not finished. One evening, a grand gala was held at the family estate. Billionaires, businessmen, leaders of influence all attended. Daniel was expected to appear. His father had one goal: to restore the family name by proving Daniel's loyalty. Daniel knew this was the moment where he had to choose between the old life and the truth. He had embraced. The mansion glittered with chandeliers, laughter spilling. From the marble halls, waiters glided with trays of wine and silver dishes. Daniel entered in a simple suit, not the tailored luxury his father demanded. Eyes followed him, whispers rising. That is him, the son who disgraced his father. He ignored them. Samuel's words echoed in his mind. "Stand firm, boy." Even silence can roar. As the evening unfolded, his father finally called for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "my son has made mistakes. He has been misguided. But tonight, he will show you that he knows his place." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had not agreed to this. His father gestured for him to step forward. "Speak, boy. Tell them who you are. Tell them what you owe to this family." Daniel's heart pounded. The crowd stared. Wealth and power pressed on him like a suffocating wave. And then he saw Samuel standing at the edge of the hall, silent. His presence alone was enough. Daniel took a breath and stepped forward. He could feel his father's expectation like chains pulling him down. But he remembered sweeping floors at dawn. He remembered helping classmates. He remembered speaking truth on stage. He could not betray that. "My name is Daniel." He began, his voice calm, steady. "I am the son of a billionaire. That much is true. But I am also a son of something greater, a son of truth, a son of dignity." His father's face darkened. The guests shifted, murmuring. Daniel continued louder. "I used to think I was rich, but I was poor. Poor in wisdom, poor in heart. Wealth gave me walls, but not direction. But one man taught me what wealth could not." His eyes flicked toward Samuel. "A man you may ignore, a man you may look down on, but a man richer than all of us here tonight, because he carries truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. His father's fists clenched, his voice cut sharp enough to slice through the air. "Enough! You will not disgrace this family again." Daniel turned to him. "No, father. I will not disgrace this family. I will save it. But not with lies. With truth. And if that means losing everything, then so be it." The silence was thunderous. His father's face twisted with rage, but the crowd was no longer with him. Some eyes gleamed with curiosity, some with admiration. The mighty billionaire who commanded empires now looked small before the courage of his own son. Samuel's eyes glistened with pride. He had said little that night, but Daniel knew the old man's silence was louder than applause. The days that followed were a storm. His father made good on his threat. Daniel was cut off from luxury, from inheritance, from every privilege he once relied on. But Daniel did not collapse. Instead, he worked. He studied harder. He took small jobs, tutoring, helping wherever he could. He lived simply, but lived fully. His classmates, who once mocked him, now turned to him for guidance. He became not the heir to wealth, but the heir to truth. One evening, Samuel sat with him under the oak tree, watching the sun sink into gold and crimson. "You have done what I hoped, boy," Samuel said. "You have stood firm against the storm." Daniel looked at him softly. "I lost everything." Samuel chuckled. "No, you gained yourself, and that is everything." Daniel realized then that he was no longer afraid of who he was or who he might become. He had been rich in money but poor in wisdom. Now he was rich in truth, and that wealth could never be taken away. The months after Daniel's public stand were hard and humbling. He woke before dawn and studied by the dim light of a desk lamp. He worked small jobs at the campus library, mopping floors in the evening or tutoring younger students for pocket money. The same people who once called him spoiled now looked at him with respect. He was no longer a prince in exile. He was a man being forged. Samuel often met him under the oak tree after long days. They sat in silence as the campus lights flickered. On around them, Daniel shared his fears quietly. "What if I fail? What if I never become enough?" Samuel would simply smile and say, "Failure is not the end, boy. It is a lesson. Keep walking. The truth will not abandon you." Daniel held on to those words. When exhaustion weighed him down, one afternoon, Daniel received news. His father's business empire was under scrutiny. The board was restless. Whispers of corruption were growing. The great man who once stood untouchable now seemed cornered. The irony struck Daniel. His father had tried to strip him of everything, but now it was his father who was losing control. Yet Daniel felt no joy. He felt only sadness. He remembered Samuel's teaching. Never rejoice in another man's fall, not even your enemy. For the measure of your soul is in the mercy you hold. Weeks later, fate brought father and son together again. Daniel was walking across the city when he was summoned to a private meeting in his father's office. The once proud man now looked smaller, his hair grayer, his voice less certain. He asked Daniel quietly, "You chose truth over me. Did it make you strong?" Daniel stood tall, but his heart softened. "Father," he said, "I did not choose truth over you. I chose truth for us. You just could not see it." His father's eyes dropped heavy with shame. For a moment, he looked like a man stripped of armor. Daniel wanted to reach out, but Samuel's wisdom held him steady. Sometimes truth must be carried alone until others are ready. Meanwhile, Daniel's life found new purpose. The school invited him to speak to younger students about resilience, about humility, about the value of wisdom beyond wealth. He began mentoring children from poor neighborhoods, bringing them hope that they too could rise. His words carried weight because they were born of loss and struggle, not privilege. He became a living bridge between two worlds. Samuel watched all this quietly. His pride showed not in words, but in the soft glow of his eyes whenever Daniel passed. By one evening, as they walked together, Samuel spoke. "You have carried truth well, boy. But remember, one day you must carry it without me." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Samuel's voice was calm. "Time spares no man. My duty was to plant the seed, yours is to grow the forest." Daniel's chest tightened. The thought of losing Samuel was unbearable. The day came quietly. Samuel did not arrive for his morning shift. The campus whispered. The janitor who had walked the halls for decades had fallen ill. Daniel rushed to his side in the small, modest home Samuel lived in. The old man lay on his bed, weak but smiling. Daniel sat by him, tears welling. "You cannot leave me," Samuel whispered gently. "I was never meant to stay forever. I was meant to pass something on to you." He placed a hand on Daniel's. "Daniel, promise me this. Do not keep the truth for yourself. Give it away. Give it freely. Give it bravely." Daniel's tears spilled, but he nodded. "I promise." Samuel smiled, closed his eyes, and with one last breath, was gone. The grief was heavy. Daniel felt as though the world had lost its anchor. But as the days passed, he remembered Samuel's words. Give it away. And so he did. At Samuel's memorial, students, teachers, even staff who had once overlooked him gathered to honor the man they had barely seen yet, who had touched them through Daniel's story. Daniel stood before them not as a billionaire's son, not as a fallen heir, but as a student of truth. He spoke. Samuel was more than a janitor. He was a teacher, a mentor, a man who carried more wealth in his heart than any fortune could hold. He saved me from myself, and he can save you too, if you carry what he gave me. The audience wept. That day, the janitor was no longer invisible. His name was carved into the memory of everyone there. Years passed. Daniel built a foundation in Samuel's name to help underprivileged students. It grew beyond the school to cities across the nation. Lives were changed not by money, but by wisdom, by dignity, by truth. He became a leader not of riches, but of hearts. His father saw this from afar. The proud man who once believed wealth was everything now realized his son had surpassed him. One quiet evening, Daniel returned to the oak tree where it had all begun. He sat alone watching the sunset. The wind rustled the leaves, and for a moment he could almost hear Samuel's voice in the breeze. Speak from truth, not from fear. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered, Thank you, Samuel, wherever you are. The boy who was once rich in money but poor in wisdom was now a man rich in truth, carrying the legacy of a janitor who had changed the world. The story had come full circle. The janitor spoke once, but his truth lived forever.